By the way, this is starting tonight, we're having to change the format of the show. I am. The whole approach, because over the weekend, I went into a deep analytic session with a local psychologist. And thanks to her splendid help, she was able to drag out of me certain repressed memories that showed that years ago I had been brainwashed by some cult. And it just finally came to my attention. So I'm going to have to, now that I have wised up, I'm going to have to take a completely different course with this. Either that or sit back on the memories again. But it's too late since I'd already written the news for the night, so. One man who for most of his life had been engaged in the search for the secret said that it was a mite easier back when he believed that there was always something else left to know rather than now, when he realizes that it is always a matter of that something left to do. Yes, noted a rejuvenated patient, I once was bulimic until I gave up food altogether. For those of you who are just tuning in, if you care to watch my hands, I don't do magic tricks, but everything that's read off one page, supposedly, according to the writers, I just read it, supposedly is in some way connected, related. A man's normal state of consciousness, combined with all of the world it perceives out there, is like a roll of tape, one being the adhesive, the other the backing. And it doesn't matter which you see as being which. It all comes out the same and keeps you stuck right where you are. Everyone knows that you can't talk to an elephant and by your words make it aware of its pachydermian nature. Nor can you speak to a puppet and cause it to realize its inanimate captive condition. Yet men expect that somehow, in some way, their very essence can be verbally explained to them. But such is one of the glories of the mind, to confidently expect the impossible. Another difference between the seekers of enlightenment and those who've experienced it is that the former still consider themselves ill and in need of a cure, while those who've been there now understand that there is actually no such thing as that perceived mortal malady. Not being able to find a doctor makes an illness more tolerable. Same page again, that kind of thing. Only men, not individually conscious, consider the matter of theirs a closed question. Consciousness and telecommunications. As long as life can get you on the line, you're a goner. Through religion, men attempt to explain themselves by the introduction of extra-systemic supernatural forces, gods, and through psychology by the consideration of local, quite natural, external influences. And yet, neither offers conclusive satisfaction. One taking recourse in faith, the other in needed additional data. The body makes no measurements, while those of the mind are always incomplete, in that a tape never includes itself in its calculations. Long, long ago was a wondrous bird which sang songs never heard before. But as it evolved, it stopped its singing, but never forgot that it once had. It is only on such a basis that any creature can be truly called wondrous. The more does man become civilized and mentally oriented, the more do some discover and denounce what they perceive to be within him older physical traits that are now biodegrading and unacceptable. Words can talk a good game, but it still takes actions it is still actions that must play it, no matter what rules the former have proposed. There are two ways you can picture what stands between you and a different state of consciousness. either you or everything else in the universe. And when the distinction between the two becomes increasingly blurred, you're getting cozily close. But if you want to know the full story, you're really getting close when you've passed the point of even thinking much anymore about what it is standing between you and it. There once was a knight who noted, after you've seen the inside of a dragon's mouth, from inside the dragon's mouth, there's not really much more to say about it. If you don't know the real truth about life, then everything else that you do know is flawed, not to mention a bit foolish. One man's theory is that most of people's problems are caused by them having too much free time on their hands. And from the body's view, this is at least partially true. After a lifetime spent reading all of the mystical literature available, and after conferring with all of the living experts, one man finally realized that all that is pertinent regarding the desire for mental transcendency can be fully covered in 2 words. 2 words. And after realizing this, was not quite sure for a while whether or not he was pleased that he had made the discovery. Of course, one of the neater attributes of making a discovery is that you cannot later undiscover it. Well, not without making some most ordinary efforts. That is, not without totally lapsing back into making no extraordinary efforts at all. But even then, I will confess, some irreversible damage may have been done. Like with a man drowning who, instead of gradually sinking and giving in to the apparently inevitable, keeps having memories of his past acts of swimming. And of course, calling this damaging, in the case of those who know how to make use of it, is anything but. It becomes the kerosene-soaked cob stuck in one of your more sensitive orifices. If you're lucky. To pay someone else to mentally entertain you is to pay someone to stupid you. And you've got your own thoughts that'll do it for free. It's not demons, gods, karma, the stars, or malevolent forces that hold a man to his present state of consciousness, just the simple laws of physics. Beliefs are to the mind as pictures of food are to the stomach, and people will see what they want to see if they cannot locate the actual thing. Criticism and the matter of flight. As long as you find fault with the blue jays, the cuckoos, and the crows, you'll stay weighted down with bird shit and never get off the ground. And of course, if you think about the blue jays, the cuckoos, and the crows, you'll find fault with them. That's the name of that pretend aeronautics game. The assumed benefits of power, even when it is blind, deaf, and undirected, is that the captain of the Flying Dutchman can proclaim to the crew, I may not be able to get off this ship, but neither can you, and feel better for it. Anytime you look away, you're not looking at a real man's problem. By the way, for $2 more, I'll change the word problem to challenge. Or for a bit more effort on your part, it won't matter. Some health news. The benefits of hypochondria should be obvious. It's much easier to stay all worked up over worrying about the car's finish than it is to face the prospects of a valve job. By the way, for any who find the thought of being able to express the complete truth about life in 2 words, if you find it a bit too much, here's an alternative. it can be fully covered with just one hand gesture. Men favor the ideas and gods and gurus in that they represent someone else making the effort to awaken for them. Few ever realize that no one else can die for your sins of routine consciousness. It's your personal awareness involved, and nothing that anyone else might do can change that. Only you can. But there's sure no doubt that it is so difficult and unlikely as to make attractive the notion that someone else might somehow be able to do it for you. And in addition to gods and gurus, why do you think all forms of popular entertainment are popular? One guy attempted to adopt this approach. Okay, if I've just got to talk, I am not going to talk about anything that happened more than 10 seconds ago. One man says that it finally hit him that about the only difference between, say, a dog's consciousness and that of a man is that while stumbling around and bumping into things, man can think about stuff. There are parts of the secret that are never spoken of, even by those who know it. The understanding of consciousness is the true field of archaeology. For usually a considerable period of time, those interested in the awakening are satisfied to merely be beat up on, as though well-deserved guilt will force them into enlightenment. It seems impossible to completely skip this stage, but one can be aware of it and hold it to a minimum. Before you know the truth about life, you're always looking for more than there actually is, which is the nature of thought. The question of their intentions doesn't enter into it. The simple fact is that anyone who insists that you need help and offers it is a danger to you. Consciousness and the sea. As long as you're alive, you have to row the boat. Even more so than sex and your own private thoughts, the enlightenment is the most intimate and personal experience possible for man. So much so that it can never be adequately shared or described. For every 100 people who will say that they want to know the truth about life, 99 of them have no idea what they're talking about. Okay, skip the niblets, down to the cob. Nothing means anything if you're thinking about it. Multiplicity and the single matter of what is. Once you know the truth about life, you can certainly speak of many things, but you're always talking about the same thing. A mystic once said to some interested people, even though I may refer to that sought-for state of consciousness as extraordinary, it is, in fact, when you are in it, most ordinary indeed, and strikes one as undoubtedly one's proper condition. One man who for most of his life, that's page 1, he's back again. And some of you do not believe in reincarnation. There he is. One man who for most of his life had been engaged in the search for the secret. What if I just go through them all again? Said that it was a mite easier back when he believed that there was always something else left to know. I was talking to that guy I mentioned to you. Again. Who I would think you should find of some interest, since he is older than most of us and been engaged in this sort of activity all of his life, as far as I can tell. And I happened to be talking to him again. And I brought up the subject of, did he know any secret? And he says that if there is a secret, when I say a secret, not the secret, but if there was some shortcut, if there was like a secret pill, a secret piece of information that a person, if they had it, or a trick, that would be a guaranteed jump from here to the state. And he said if there was, that no one on this planet, no human has ever located it. And then he pointed this out. You understand what we're talking about is a shift, complete shift of consciousness into the state wherein, as I was describing it, you can be conscious without comment. So I'll assume that he would accept the same description, but that's what we're speaking of. But he said that contrary to what ordinary people perceive, what many people now consider their activity of pursuing or following some previously laid down discipline, he said that no one has ever discovered such. And then he went on to point out that for there to be such, let's just call it a magic pill. That is, that something, if you were interested in it, that there would be what would amount to a magical pill either literally or allegorically. Something that you could take and within a reasonable length of time be assured that it would take you from your present condition into that state, or let's just enlightenment. And he says, he points out that not only has no one ever found it, but that for such a thing to work, let's go ahead and call it a pill. He pointed out that the pill would either have to be a time machine or it would have to be a spatial, so what do you call it? Distorter, I guess is what he said. Something I knew what he meant at the time. It would either have to be a time pill, a time machine. That is, you would either have to take it, and let us say that it worked within, well, if it worked in your lifetime would be sufficient. Well, let's say that it worked within a year or an hour, it doesn't matter. But he is saying if there was such a pill that would do that, then the pill itself would have to be a time machine in you. Because for it to work under the conditions as they are now, whenever that is, just as the whole universe is right this second, if there was such a pill for an interested man or woman who wanted that state, who wanted to know what it was, so that they'd know whether to press on. At any rate, if you took the pill, there was such a pill and it would work, and the conditions are as they are right now. Let's say that the pill would work within 5 minutes, just to make so we can talk about it. What it would require is that that pill be a literal time machine, because for you to still be there spatially, for you to physically be standing here to take this pill, it would have to amount to a time machine, because what it would amount to would it would put you internally into the future. Because there is no such thing, according to him, as a magic pill that would take you there under the present conditions without it either distorting time, changing time, or space. And that was the second one. As I assume that most of you, well, to your experience, there is no such thing as a time machine pill. But you understand, it would have to remove you in time, because what it would be amounting to was if you physically stayed where you were, where you are now when you took the pill. Internally, you would have to move in time, because for you to be more conscious through a pill, not through some effort, but through this kind of pill, through magic, then internally you would have to move forward. You would have to move forward further than a lifetime. So internally, in some way, you would have to move. Let's say if you were just 30 years old, you're talking about, let's be on the safe side, you would have to move at least 100 years forward. That's what would have to happen for you to have such a pill. The other alternative would be that you would take the pill, and if were it not a time machine, then the pill would have to be something that would that would distort or even remove you spatially, because you cannot stay right where you are. Not that you're important, not that anyone's important, but here you are at one spot taking up a piece of room, one position in the universe, and for you to suddenly, within minutes, go into another state of consciousness through something other than your own effort, through this magic pill, through this pill, it would physically have to move you. If it did not move you temporally, if you did not go 100 years in advance internally, while physically still standing here, the only other alternative, were there such a pill, would physically, you would have to disappear and end up somewhere else. You would have to go some other place in this universe other than where you are now for that to occur. Believing myself to have grasped the point he was making, then on your behalf, I said, well, and since you've been involved with this more than anyone that we've ever met, what can a man do if there is no magic pill? And I brought up some of the more common known apparent disciplines and methods. I picked out meditation because he many times uses the term enlightenment, that state. And it's obvious he's not all that concerned with it, but that's his term, so it just rang a bell with me. And I said, going back to the basic Zen and general Buddhist and North Middle Eastern, Tibetan, all Indian, the idea that meditation, the idea of sitting and trying to focus one's attention, or in the alternative, if you want to look at it, another way of trying to calm the mind in such a way that it is not particularly focused on anything. And I asked him about that. And he pointed this out, that is a completely different animal than the state of enlightenment itself. Because any attempt at using meditation in its widest possible sense, any sort of apparent mental exercise, discipline, approach wherein you are directly attempting to affect your thinking under whatever guise, whatever name, he is saying is a completely different creature than enlightenment itself. And he explained it as enlightenment not offering a focused view on anything, nor is it offering a non-focused view of anything. What it presents to a person is a totally new way of thinking. That the way he puts it, that after at least one good dose of it, one good trip, or maybe several lesser trips, but he says after several times, and I think were he given more to the classical kind of description, he would just said once and be done with it, because this makes it too complicated and he gets too verbose sometimes. That's why I don't talk to him more often. Let me straighten out. I mean, he's not here to say anything about it, and I'm not going to actually misuse his words. A sufficient period of that particular state changes forever. Your way of thinking. All of the disciplines, all of the efforts are aimed at something specific, something that must be described, that you would tell a man if the school of, if its teaching was that you sit silently, motionlessly, and you attempt to focus on, and they give a description of a picture, a word, an idea. And they say that the point of trying to reach, and they may even be using such terms as enlightenment, that is, yes, what we're here. And our approach to it is that you sit motionless, you sit still, you sit quietly, and you attempt to focus all of your attention on this one thing we're going to tell you, an idea, a word, sound. And that when you reach the point that you can so focus all of your consciousness, sitting there by yourself, only you know it, but that you can, for some length of time, when you can successfully do this, that you can sit there and focus your attention on one thing and one thing only, that you can cut everything else, all the noise, everything stops, except your concentration on this one thing. That is the goal, is what they say. And this guy I know says that that's not it. Nor would it be the other side of that method, which is just a variation of the same one, is to say that the attempt is to sit and quiet the mind totally, that you're not trying to focus on anything, that what you're trying to do, and the most common or easiest example and picture is to, again, describe that the mind is always making noise, like the waves on a lake, and what you're attempting to do is to sit and not look at any of the waves, not focus on anything. It's just sit and sit and sit, and that sooner or later, if the gods and Buddhists smile upon you, the day comes that the whole point being is suddenly you're not focused on anything and it all just stops. And there you are conscious with no chatter, No thought is what it amounts to. Not focused on anything, totally unfocused and yet conscious. He says that that is not it. That it is not the same thing as the experience itself, because both of them start out from the position that there is a describable point to this, having to do with thought, to either be able to focus your thought on one thing to such a degree that you can concentrate, that you can hold your attention, that you are so single-minded in your intention and your strength and your ability, and your concentration, that you can sit there and hold only one thought and stop everything else. Stop all the background noise. Stop your attention from going from focusing on this one thing and saying the word or the picture, and it does that, and then you go, boom, and you're off of it, and you're back again, you're off of it, you're back again. You know, that's the nature of such sitting for many, many years. Some people their whole lifetime, and it never gets much beyond, yeah, I'm back, I'm back, I'm back. But see, it describes that there is a point of success, and they can describe it, that you want to be able to hold your thoughts, focus your attention to such a degree that you can hold it on one thing and one thing only. That you can just pick it out and think, well, I'm going to think about this one thing. And I can do it as long as I want to. I can just think of that and stop everything else. The other version being that I can. It's sort of a passive other side of the same thing, because it's harder to say exactly what you're doing, in the sense that the first version you say, well, the point is we're giving you a word or a picture, and you focus your attention until further notice. Success will be is when you can sit there, and you'll know it when it happens. It may take months, it may take years, it may happen the first day you come here and go in there and sit, says the headmaster of some school. It may happen to you, it has happened in the past by many reports, that you may leave here and go in there and sit, and before we ring the lunch bell, it may have happened to you, but it may never happen. But you'll know it when it does, because you'll be able to focus and you'll understand. There'll be no doubt, you won't need anyone. You'll know that right now everything's stopped in my consciousness except my focusing on that one thing that I intended to focus upon. That one sounds a bit harder or more vague to describe, because they can't tell you exactly what to do except just sit, be still, and what you're trying to do in a sense is just wear down the mind. It's just do not pay any attention, do not focus on any thought. Treat it all as though it is noise. Treat it all as though it is irrelevant. Pay it no mind, which you can have your choice of either school. Some people find one of them more egregiously disturbing and frightening than the other. And of course, some right-thinking people hear both descriptions and say, no thanks. That was a little Buddhist humor there, see. In that case, it wasn't. I refuse to be made a metaphysical fool of. It wasn't humor, I just said that. The other version sounds less specific in its direction, but it is simply that they have to tell you, sit. When you leave here, again, they say it may happen to you within an hour from now, the first day you're here, or it may take 10 years, or it may take a lifetime. But you simply sit, and you do not you try and keep your mind from following your thoughts. But by the same way, a person thinks their success for a long time, or their discipline, their exercise of this seems to be no more than, they try to sit. And it's like, here's all that noise, all the waves going, like traffic noise. And rather than suddenly focusing on one wave, one thought, one car that went by, it's like momentarily, it's almost like you back off and you can see all this going on, all of the noise, all the movement, and you can back off and you're not focused, and then you fall back over and you're focused. And you go, I got to shake out of it. So it's just the same thing, but it's almost the other side of trying to focus your attention. As you're trying not to focus on it. But the best they can describe it is, if you reach a point where you cannot focus on it, it'll finally stop. It just goes, it deadlined, flatlines. He points out, the guy I was talking to, that although the methods, he he was not using a critical tone of voice, but he pointed out this is not the so-called satori, this is not the awakening, the enlightenment, the liberation itself, because it has no describable point to it. And it does not simply focus your attention or unfocus your attention. It changes the nature of attention forever. And of course, I throw in from my own view, it's like, just in case you don't think that Buddha could ever trip and hurt himself and holler, God damn, and then you can always take a nap. But the thing is, to use it in a simplistic way, that once it finally happens, to someone intending it to happen, of course, when it happens, it has, keeping in mind, you can always take a slight nap. It has changed, not your focus. It is not changed simply the way you think about certain things. It has changed the nature of thought. And if I may be so bold as to inject, it is generally what I have in mind when I speak about the foolishness of the mind taking life seriously. Because even considering the fact that you can always take a slight nap, you can take a slight nap if you really want to for years and still not be able to get over this. But even that notwithstanding, it has changed basically, according to him. It has changed radically your relationship to thought, because after that you can never fully again understand, I'm using dogmatic unconditional words, but you can never fully again, a person who's had the experience, think about life, think about what you think about life, think about thinking itself, never again in the way in which you did. And it doesn't matter what the way was beforehand. Which, for a person to have this experience, it doesn't matter whether you're an Indian speaking Farsi or whether you're a German speaking German or a Brazilian speaking Portuguese. It doesn't matter what religion, it doesn't matter what culture, it doesn't matter anything about you. It's that after that you can never again think as you did. And the really tricky part in that is you cannot ever think about thinking. Your whole attitude about what the mind is never again very solid. Or if I may say, it's never again very serious. It in fact seems to be one of the small-time smoke alarms in people who have had the experience, is to find yourself, even though you may not be able to even remember to wear your hair shirt or to poke yourself in the eye every morning, is just to find yourself after having the experience, after knowing better, after actually seeing life, is to later find yourself, and I say yourself, let's be more specific, your thinking has suddenly gone back into this role in its combination to life, that you and your perception of life are now back to a role of 3M cellophane tape, and you suddenly catch yourself, and it's always, according to him, and I agree, I say always, at least 99-something% of the time, find yourself seriously thinking about, in a critical way, something serious in life, something that is, well, by God, just serious. And you suddenly realize, I don't need spikes in my hands. I don't need a thorn of crowns. I don't need Buddha behind me. I got me. This is what he was attempting to say, I believe, that you can never again think the same way, and you can never again think about thinking. You simply cannot accept thinking as you did. Again, I got to point out the truth. You still got to go, because hell, man, you get all wound up, which I was sort of laying the groundwork for this some time back, a few nights back, pointing out the thing that they let slip in the Bible, and how do you explain it, that life lets certain dynamics go on that are inexplicable based upon the context in which they exist, is how did this whole thing of a divinely inspired religion with a semi-divine figure, Jesus, end up dying and at the last minute go, why the hell did this happen to me? You know, this thing about whatever it is he's on the cross of, you know, oh, my Father, why have thou forsaken me? And what he was saying was, he realized, as we point out, if you remember, we took a vote and we all agreed, it is not beyond reason that a man up there with spikes driven in his hands, everybody spitting on him and throwing urine in his face, sticking him, and he's been dying, you know, they wouldn't go ahead and shoot him, that it's not completely beyond the pale of possibilities that even a man who had had serious moments of the awakening would there right then look down and think, you know, I don't know, perhaps just a momentary ill thought towards some of the Romans or some of the people. And then realize, damn, after all I've been through, and here in my final minutes, I still took a nap. He wasn't talking to God, he was talking to himself. He was talking to his own thoughts. How could I do this? Or, if that sounds too harsh, he realized, well, here you go again. So, you understand, let's assume that, and that's just the best example, it's most readily available, but I could make up others about Buddha or Muhammad or anybody else. But at any rate, take that as being what I was talking about, that even there, let's assume a man who had man who had quite sufficient experience with the Satori, with the enlightenment, that knew damn well what life was about. And yet there it was we all agreed under, fairly harsh conditions. Not your standard everyday run of events that would happen to most of us. And so there he is, and even, let's assume, one of the most enlightened people on the planet at the time, took a short nap. Like he looks down, here's that woman, come back with her chamber pot again, full of piss, and he thinks, not her again. And then realizes, uh-oh. A little piss in the face, and I'm getting pissed off again. And he wishes at least one hand was free, so he, to himself could go. But all he could do was say, oh, damn, here I am again. That represents one version. That represents what this fella, and I'm conveying that he said, is that you can never, again, fully think about life or think about thinking in the same way, even while taking a nap. Even while there he was dying, and he suddenly realized, here I did it again. But you notice, he could not take it seriously. You never can again. You can take a slight nap, whatever it took, minutes, hours, it doesn't matter. But the thing is, you are never completely underwater again. You cannot passively go meet Davy Jones. Now you can just kind of gradually keep getting lower and lower. And I don't know any rules and any guarantee I can give to this. I'll go back and quote him. He just says, and there's other records. Phew, boy, I got out of that. All records seem to indicate, all recordings, and this guy, who I take for knowing what he's talking about, or I would not be referring to him, that you cannot completely ever go back to thinking about existence, about you, about life as you did, nor can you ever again accept thought as you have now. You can never again. You can get caught up and be thinking about something, it seems, and I've picked out Jesus because most people consider pain, impending death, as serious business. But it doesn't have to be that far. But as people suddenly it's been cheated, or people, what's really good is world events, something the president, the prime minister said, the head of the Reserve Bank, and you hear it or you read it, and suddenly your mind is just going crazy about, what are they going to do to my taxes? What's this going to do to are they ever going to do anything about the prime interest rate, whatever it is, and you find yourself being seriously involved with your thinking, what you're thinking about what's going on, except, according to him and all other reports, from after you have once had the real experience, after that, the best you can hope for, if you want to put it that way, is slight, momentary lapses. And even then, it's not fully grounded. It's always shaky. I'm trying to be encouraging. All right, go back to Jesus. There he was dying, and he did get mad, and let's assume that, under his breath, or at least to himself, he cursed this old woman, walking back up with another chamber pot full. And he said, God damn. And he realized it. Usually, I would suggest, I would think, that someone who'd had the experience, it's almost enough just to get mad at somebody, to at least bring you out of it momentarily. Because you can no longer even fully be mad. You can no longer fully be critical. It's not that you can't fall into it, but you pull the foundations out. There's a part of you now, not an imaginary part. It is more real than any other part of your psyche than you've ever touched. That from then on out, even if you in some way really got caught up, it's still always partially a sham. Because even if you're passionate enough to curse somebody or get mad and go, it's not going anywhere. Either then, 2 minutes later, an hour later, if you once seen what life's about, sometime shortly, it's going to strike you if you're going, it's like, well, damn, I got to get another hobby. It's like now you show up to some kind of convention that you used to find, the hobbyist convention of stamp collectors or something. And now every time you go back there and everybody's oohing and awing over stamps and you do your best, you join in, oh, is that new one? And you realize, who am I fooling? I don't have any interest in stamps. But there you find yourself drawn there. Oh, what is that? And somebody starts to tell you, and now you're all excited. And you realize, what the hell am I doing here? I don't give one small goddamn for stamp collecting. Same way, how dare people treat me like this? Or what are these people? The world is obviously, I used to think things might work out. But God Almighty, if we have people this stupid running our country, spending our money, and suddenly you think, I got no interest in stamp collecting. And it's not on the basis of some verbal rationalization, of course. It's just that you, as Jesus, I'm using that story, you just simply pop back into your senses that you've got no real foundation for this. It's just as though that your regular thinking process is like everyone else, and the world of events, which is flowing through you, same energy. It is like adhesive tape. And you're just stuck back on it momentarily. Oh, how much are those stamps? $100! And then you realize, what am I complaining about? I'm not going to buy them. That's that kind of thing brings you back. $100 for that? And you suddenly realize, why am I complaining? They could say $1,000. I got no interest. I'm not going to buy a stamp. If they gave it to me, I'd throw it away. I'd forget to take it home. Same thing about, God, how can life do this? How can people be that way? And you realize, what am I doing? I don't care how they are. I'll be back in a minute, folks. I got to go get some money to buy those stamps. So I asked the guy. I said, well, is there anything, what would you say is the sorts of things that a person could do that if attempting to actually pursue the two primary methods that have always been used and all its lesser tributaries that go into all sorts of chanting and prayers and ended up in religion, but that covers the main two because it's always, the whole field is right here. And so, that is the two main descriptions. You can come up with others. You could even try to make up your own version, but it's going to fall in one of those two classes of either trying to hold your thinking on one thought or else to take your hands completely off thinking and let them run wild until the sons of bitch wear themselves out and drop. It's the same thing, but you can take either approach, or you can believe that you make up your own version, but if you do, then just think about it, and it's still one of those two. So that being the case, and him having already gone through all I've been relating to you for the last 30 minutes, I then said, well, what would you, if somebody was talking to you, and you weren't going to pursue one of those specific methods, what could a person do? A person just still in ordinary life. So when I asked him that, he got up and said, I got to go to the bathroom. And he said, order me another cup of coffee. And he didn't come back, I think. I'm surprised I didn't know where the story was going. Couldn't wait to hear it. That's it. And I sat there. Stiffed me for the bill. I had to pay the bill completely. Plus I had to pay for a cup of coffee that he'd even drank. I had to pay for that one. Oh, yeah. And then when I did finally realize, or they'd been gone too long, I walked in the back there at the huddle house, looked in the men's bathroom, he wasn't there, and even looked in the women's, he wasn't there. And there was no way out, so I couldn't figure because he had to come by me. Now I walked outside, and my car was gone. I knew I should have gone into fiction. So then I was sorely puzzled. So I walked back to inside, and there was this pretty good-looking waitress who had been serving our table. I started to quote before I did that, give you a general idea, and I decided it was almost insulting. And then I thought, well, nothing's insulting if it's helpful. It's back to where I asked him, well, if somebody was asking you, what can you do in life? What would you suggest? If there's nothing you can actually do, if there's not a pill that you can take that without any doubt, that a good serious person will pay good money for the pill and place their hand over their heart to do something, if there's no pill that you can take that in your lifetime in this universe will put you in that state. There is no automatic, there is no mechanical, there is no proven, there is no externally driven way that you can achieve that state. If that's the case, and he said it is, and the case is of the two primary methods, all the historical methods used to attempt to achieve a state of enlightenment, if those two are not, even if they're a goal, what they promise is not the state itself, he says, which it's not. I said, well, what would you say if someone was just sitting here and heard us talking, and they said, well, what can a person do? The reason I changed the story there in mid-story about him going to the bathroom and not returning is that I just, thinking along, I was reading several words ahead of what I was saying. I don't mean to cheat, but sometimes I read a few words ahead, just so, in case I won't make any changes or there's a typo. Or the possibility, as unlikely as it sounds, of a misspelling. I at first decided that I was getting a bit too simplistic of what I was going to quote him as having said, but as I said, now I have changed my mind. Plus, he finally came back. I don't know where the hell he was hiding, but he finally came back to the table. And he said, I thought about what you said. And he said, what I was going to answer at first might strike you as too simplistic and crude. And I thought, what a coincidence, because that's what I was thinking. Of course, it's hard to explain how I was thinking that tonight while talking about him doing that. You understand? Well, a little Buddhist science fiction, since my attempted Buddhist humor went over so well. I said no, because anything that might be useful is never too crude or too simplistic. He then pointed out that another prime distinction, I don't know, maybe he's been watching me, the show, the prime distinction between religion, which would seem to be sort of the common, or what many people assume should be the active, the public, the organized, the reliable, the civilized form of mysticism would be religion in one form or the other. He was pointing out the difference between that and those actually individually involved, dedicated to achieving the state. That one of the prime differences is that religions are involved with behavior, that their concern is over behavior. And I said, yeah, I agreed. And he says, whereas this has almost nothing to do with behavior. And I said, well, press on, please do. And he said, but the interesting thing that he was going to point out was that all of the behaviors covered, and especially the behaviors either encouraged or prescribed by all the world's religions, he says it doesn't matter which one, if you think about them, just pick them out. The kinds of behaviors that they really either encourage or discourage, that those behaviors, anybody attempting to achieve the state, if they have nothing else to do, would do well to at least recall those, because they are based upon the reality of what would be a man's behavior were he more conscious. He then concluded which is really coincidentally, he concluded about the same time that we are. There is mysticism for you. Ooh. Well, he did. He then concluded, right after those remarks, which I assume everyone was getting, that the kinds of things about judge not, for instance, good Christian, Judaic, Buddhist idea, do not judge your fellow man, it's not your business, it's up to God and all that stuff. Of course, they really mean it's like, well, keep your ideas to yourself. Just because your fellow man may be a heathen or live some sort of behave in such a way that you disapprove of, and it may be wrong, but don't get involved with it. Do not act on it. Do not go out to your fellow man. You might invite him to church. You might try to give him a nice word of reprimand, or, may I give you a hint? And of course, he's an average person. He's going to say, bug off. That's a little Southern Baptist humor. Of course, they use a stronger term than bug off, but I don't use it on a family TV show. He was saying that a person actually involved with the search for their experience would do well, if they can't think of anything else to do, is to at least consider, to remember all of the prescriptions and exhortations of all religions about how you should behave, and then forget the behavior part and consider from what possible discovery within the experience of satori, of the enlightenment, of seeing what life's about, from what knowledge might that arise, what knowledge might be the source of this coming out into the public marketplace on the basis of behavior, which it always does. That's all religion amounts to. That's all civilization. And all of its prohibitions and all of its exhortations about how a good citizen should act. It's all the same thing. It turns into behavior. They'll admit, well, we can't legislate. We can't legislate morality, but we can, by God, make something against the law, and we can say that us as a group, we will not tolerate a person beating up on a child or one person attacking another one physically. You may hate the person. We can't stop that. You may hate people of other nationalities or religions. We can't stop that, but we can stop you behaving on it. That's all civilization and religion is up to. But he suggested, consider the behavior that is prescribed or encouraged, and from what possible understanding, not normally thought about with people, from what understanding from a more enlightened state might those kinds of encouragements and prohibitions arose. He then concluded, I'm going to try to put it, I'll try to quote him, or I know what he meant, I'm guessing, one way or the other. He said, on top of all that, since religion ends up making people feel beat upon, feel guilty, because what religion demands, what civilization demands, what being alive and intelligent demands can never be satisfied. It's not the fault of religion, it's not the fault of civilization, it's not the fault of anybody. If you're alive and you're generally wound up and intellectually active to the average degree, you cannot be satisfied. And that's part of the benefit, part of the use of religion, etc., for those of you who didn't get one of my news items, that the inability to find a doctor makes illness more tolerable. As long as you feel like that you are feeling guilty, as long as your sensation is, I'm feeling guilty because I'm trying to live a good Jewish, Catholic, Muslim life, and I can't do it. That the source of your guilt, as well-founded as it may be, but that your feeling of uneasiness is because of your relationship to something external to you, the church, or civilization, if you're not religious, that I'm not a good citizen. I am not maybe just a humanistic philosophy, sans any supernatural take on it. But you're aware of the fact that you're constantly cursing people, hating your fellow man, disapproving. And so, but your feeling is, well, I'm not living up to the humanistic philosophy. That's always that my feeling of dissatisfaction, it makes it more tolerable to believe that you're trying to satisfy something external to you and you've yet to measure up. If you can't find a doctor, it makes that kind of illness more tolerable. That again is a cutoff point between people actually involved with this, irreversibly so. Well, once you see what life's about, you understand that there is nobody satisfied. But he was saying, in conclusion, and he warned me that tape would run out by the time I got here, and by God, he was right. You think he doesn't know something? I told you he was sharp. He said that there should be a way in which each person could find that you're not worried about behavior and you're not judging it by anyone's external system. He was now speaking at trying to do this at the optimum level. Is that you have got to find your own way, he was suggesting, each person, for you to constantly, remember as I was describing like in the meditation attempt, to focus on one thing and you realize you forgot to focus. So you're trying to remember the word rose and you keep falling off of it and you go back. Or the feeling, the other version, you're trying not to focus on anything and it's just there and suddenly one thought grabbed you like adhesive tape, like you got your lips caught on the tailpipe of a passing 59 Buick. And you go, oh no, I can't do that. It's always a matter that you're falling off course of what you're attempting to do and then back to it and then off of it and back to it. He says that each person, that if you're not involved with some apparent, some discipline, some named school, some involvement like sitting, that you're just living life and attempting to do this, you have got to find your own way, and it can be very unmystical, very crude. But you've got to find some way that you constantly realize. Just call it, well, I'm trying to be enlightened. Just think that. And to constantly realize, well, I just forgot it. Just to remember the fact, but it's not to beat up on yourself. It's not to believe that by constantly beating up on myself that this is helping. What is helping is to constantly try and remember that I have no control. And that I claim that the most important thing, I claim that if somebody could give me a magic pill, that I would give them everything I own right now. That if there was such a pill that would put me in that state, I would give everything I've got. Okay, I'll assume that. I can understand that. He says he could at one time. But that will not do any good, even if you're that committed, if you do not try and constantly remember that you forget your commitment, that you forget the interest. Not for the sake of feeling guilty, but for the sake of learning something else. Which is, if I may suggest, if Satori, if enlightenment, let's say is a big tree out in the bayous of Louisiana, then the attempt to remember that you want to get there is like the swamp all around it. I can't tell you how close, I can't tell you how far it goes as far as you can go. You might be as far away from it as you can get, you might be close. And it doesn't matter for you to say, well, I'm on the right side, the left side, should I go north or south? It doesn't matter. But to try and to continue to remember and be aware of the fact that you damn near can't remember. That you're not even trying to do something specific like I'm trying to focus on the one word, bayou, bayou. Or I'm trying to picture the calm, serene swamps of southern Louisiana without a ripple. It doesn't have to be that exotic. It's just, I'm trying to wake up. That's when he did leave and left with the attitude, which I couldn't really say anything afterwards. I had no follow-up to it, that what are you going to do other than that? Until you find yourself hugging the tree or find the tree hugging you. Well, the memories are getting repressed again.